Hi, my name is Kathy Scholp, and I am a recent graduate of Westfield State University with a degree in communication. My research paper is about surviving trauma, a study of how women who have been through the family court system view the world. There is a growing body of research on the topic of women who have experienced trauma sharing their stories. Much of it originated in the anti-rape movement and developed in the domestic violence movement, and now there is a new branch. Organized misogynist brutality in the judicial response to mothers seeking protection in family courts. In 2021, I did a literature review of domestic violence studies. I learned that sexual violence and domestic violence are very prevalent in our culture and present serious public health issues that do great damage to women. Also, our society lacks the necessary systems to address these problems, and women who experience these traumas can gain strength from sharing their stories. One step past the work of the DV community is yet to be taken, helping the woman who does leave the violence and seeks legal protection. We find that the abusers have a well-organized vengeance and supremacy system in place to strip their would-be escaping victims of protection and to instead protect themselves from negative consequences. And their enforcers are the family courts. A woman may leave a coercive, abusive marriage and then find herself in a bewildering and punitive court proceeding where the tables are turned and she's the bad guy. She can lose custody, be labeled unfit, and even be denied visitation while her income is seized to support the perpetrator. Dr. Joan Meyer's studies have produced quantitative data showing that claims of abuse actually increase a mother's risk of losing custody. And although the research so far has concentrated on demonstrating that the abuse occurs and must be remedied, we do not yet have sufficient data on how these cases affect the actual mothers. That is, qualitative analysis of what is happening to these women trapped in this nightmare. The reason I chose to do this research was my personal story. In 2004, I was a tech sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. I had married a civilian landscaper 4 years earlier, and we had a child who was then 3 years old. We seemed like a normal, happy family, until my husband molested our toddler. This was an occurrence so bizarre and unthinkable that I had no way of knowing that it was not terribly uncommon in our current culture. Incest is strenuously kept secret, and that is the root of the evil that overtook us when I revealed the abuse and turned to the court for help. The combined forces of the state social service agencies and the family court abused me, my son, and even those who tried to help and support us, compounding the abuse. This set me on my journey of research and discovery. Because the progress made in the anti-rape movement and the domestic violence movement were slow, arduous, and incomplete, it is easy to see what an uphill battle mothers now face in this situation. We cannot simply present the problem and achieve the remedy. We must survive all our losses to persevere until we accomplish our goals. To me and to many others, a primary issue arises, that is, should I tell this story? On the one hand, it hurts me to tell the story. I relive the trauma. Also, telling the truth the first time landed me in hell. Retelling it can subject me to a terrible backlash, can damage my credibility, and can harm my reputation since there is a stigma against non-custodial mothers. Also, our society commonly admires winners, and I may be considered a loser. People may find it easy to join the judicial gang that beat me up rather than to jump into the battle on my side and get subjected to the same shame and blame. Any woman facing off against a wife batterer or child abuser in family court is an underdog. Even family members of the victimized mom may side with the abuser to stay on the safe side. I am not a psycholinguist, but I do realize, especially in our modern world of social media and communication, words form the very fabric of our lives. And so the descriptions given to me by these informants show who they are, as well as informing us about our world and changing us. The stories of the mothers become parts of our world when we hear them. I interviewed 5 mothers who had been through the family courts, had been disbelieved by the courts and agencies and various professionals, had been deprived of custody and even visitation, had been financially disabled and even impoverished, and whose relationships were in many cases distorted, stressed, maimed, and even demolished. The goal of my study was to examine how they told their stories, how they disclosed and revealed what had happened in their lives. The research question was, what happens to the mothers who lose custody and contact with their children in family court because they disclosed abuse? I asked these 5 mothers to describe their experience with family court, to tell me how it had impacted their lives, why their cases resulted in those outcomes, what advice they would give young mothers headed to family court, and whether they believed social media helped mothers in these situations. 5 women from 5 different geographical locations in the country, 5 different backgrounds, 5 different occupations or professions, several different socioeconomic characteristics, different families. One was the mother of 1 son. One mother had 5 children with a 10-year age span. 2 had college degrees, 2 were religious, 1 was a veteran. None of them had ever been in trouble with the law before, although 3 of them were jailed in the course of the proceedings. Their personalities were all different, yet their descriptions of their journeys through the family courts were marked by uncanny and striking similarities. They perceived the courts in 5 completely different judicial districts as corrupt, dangerous, unpredictable, and destructive, even insane. They said that their lives had been ruined. They had lost faith in the systems that we all rely on as a society. They were disillusioned, demoralized, disenfranchised. They reported their health had been seriously impaired, even decades after the events. They all had suffered extreme financial hardship as a result of the litigations. And even for those whose children eventually returned after turning 18, there was terrible damage to the mother-child relationships of all of the children, even those who achieved some degree of recovery. The general results demonstrated the pain that all mothers subjected to the depredations of the family court experience in one degree or another. Simply put, the family court is a form of torture for battered, protective mothers. A 2016 study published in Qualitative Research Reports and Communication observed that domestic violence victims were using Twitter to form a community and to share their stories, building power in a movement to ameliorate the problems. This hopeful development is only one edge of a double-edged sword, however. On the other side, a massive, well-developed social media blizzard of anti-mother and misogynist misinformation and disinformation floods Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We moms lack tactical response teams ready, willing, or able to defend against this pervasive onslaught. The mothers in my study had divergent views on the role of social media in the situation. Of course, their particular comfort level and skill set using social media are factors, but also there was a fundamental dichotomy here as well. The mothers I interviewed said that it helped them to learn on social media that they were not alone, and that this was a social phenomenon and not a strictly personal problem. But it hurt them in that the overwhelming burden of aggressive sound bites online was often an echo chamber of father-dominated complaints about bad mothers. The effects of social media are as unavoidable as the family court is for a mother involved in divorce. So we had best learn to develop self-protective ways to deal with it. Having confronted sexism, sexual violence against women, and domestic violence, now we arrive at another threshold: studying and dealing with the effects on women of the organized governmental violence done to motherhood and the results it produces in the lives of its victims. My conclusion is that mothers who are court abused and deprived of custody need to tell our stories and need to encourage replication and expansion of this research, not only for the moms and kids, but for our whole society. The stories of the mothers are absolutely necessary to prepare the groundwork for the social work. The operative word is work, necessary to stop the atrocity and amend the system and heal the society. 2 generations have already cycled through this horror story since the first of the 5 moms I interviewed filed for divorce in 1980. Every wound inflicted by the family courts festers and produces toxins. We need to tell our stories, and we need to hear the stories being told until some critical mass is reached. As one of the study subjects said, "Our stories are all we have."